Ray McNulty here, president of the National Dropout Prevention Center, and I'm pleased to have with me today my partner, Dr. Bill Daggett. Bill and I will be addressing Education Next, the post-COVID-19 challenge. I think all of us are know quite well the challenges that we face. And what I'd like to say at the start of this is a webinar that is being run on a Zoom, and it allows you during the presentation to, on the bottom of your screen, submit questions. We have staff that are going to look at the questions, and when we complete our work with you all today, what will happen is that we'll go and do a Q&A near the end, and Bill and I will look forward to wrapping that up with you all today. Bill, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And I want to reinforce what Ray just said. To go to the chat, ask us some questions. And I'm going to make some initial observations and then ask Ray to go a little bit more depth around the general concepts I lay out here. So I'm going to go to a PowerPoint.
Sounds good, Bill. And I'm gonna mute myself and let you take over.
Okay, great. And by the way, at the end, if anybody wants a copy of my PowerPoints or Ray, at the end, we'll tell you how you can easily get the PowerPoint. I have the privilege of soon to be announced to chair a national commission, which will involve most of the major national organizations headed by AASA and all the other national organizations, about what do we do post-pandemic. And as we've begun to talk with leaders throughout the country about that, we've begun to recognize that while there's a lot of hope, well, as soon as this get over, we'll get back to normal. Ladies and gentlemen, we're never going back to normal. I don't think it's ever going to happen. We'll go back to some degree of what used to exist. But this pandemic is a fundamental shift because it's changing the workplace and the home, our schools, it's changing society. And I want to talk a little bit about what some of those changes are. If we go back pre-pandemic, here's the reality. The number one thing you are being held accountable for as schools were test scores. Beginning with the nation at risk, accelerated by No Child Left Behind. Tests became really the central thing to hold teachers accountable, kids accountable, teachers accountable, principals, school district. But a funny thing happened. The pandemic hit. And suddenly all those tests that were front and center of everything we're supposed to do, we waived them all. And we began to recognize there was a series of other really critically important issues we needed to attend to. We had to feed our kids. We had to make sure they're healthy and safe. And if we just again collectively pause and think pre-pandemic, we knew we had a growing mental health issue in every school district in this country. We knew more and more of our kids were in crisis, and it began to feed this concept that we needed to look at SEL. The pandemic heightened that even more. But we also knew some other things pre-pandemic that we weren't paying attention to that have only accelerated during the pandemic, and that is the advancing technology. So think about the iPhone, and think for a minute how much this iPhone knows about you. You get up in the morning, if you're going to go to work, and you jump in your car and you got your phone, it seems to know that you're going to work, and it tells you how long it's going to take you to get there. If you go to a restaurant quite often, and it knows what days of the week you go, it begins to give you information about the restaurant. Incredible amount of information that that phone has. But you'd think a little bit further. Because I want to talk about where that phone is headed in the next 2 to 3 years. And I want to use Siri and Alexa as an example. Now, any of you who have ever seen me speak much know that what I'd love to do is go for the next 45 minutes of just on changing technologies. And we get in Q&A, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have on that, but let me keep it simple with this example. Now we ask basic questions to Siri and Alexa for a simple answer to a question. It's amazing how well Siri and Alexa can answer those questions. Let me tell you what's going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months. Because while we've been locked down in pandemic, you know, the tech companies are the ones that have flourished like crazy. You take the 4 large tech companies. Do you know that their net worth is in March was $4 trillion? And now in October, it is $7 trillion. And they're investing that in advancing technologies, Siri and Alexa. You're going to be able within the next year, 18 months max, be able to do this. I need a paper written that's 600 to 800 words around this topic. This is the Alexa level I need the paper written at. And these are the number of sources I need quoted. It will write the paper for you within minutes. Better than any of us can write the paper. I got a question. You gonna let kids use that technology in our schools? No, we didn't let them use the iPhone when they took a test because they might either look the answer up or they might communicate with each other, share information. Oh, by the way, use resources, work with others. The 2 most basic skills, you need to be independent in the 21st century. See, we had to keep the iPhone technology out of our schools. Now we're going to have to keep Alexa and Siri out of our schools. How are you going to keep it out of our schools when they're working in a remote location? Oh, by the way, in the workplace, do you think they're going to want to have them use this technology? Got to write a law brief. You want the law brief to be written higher quality than your attorneys can write it for pennies on the dollar using the technology? Or how about work from home? Another change. There was a little bit of that going on post-pandemic, but National Association of HR Directors had a survey 3 weeks ago. And the best estimates are about 25% of all workers post-pandemic will work from home forever, full-time. Quarter of the American workforce. Of the remaining workforce, about a third of them will work at least half-time from home. What does it mean? Total working hours, over 35% of all paid working hours in America look to be working from home forevermore. What are the skill sets you need to work from home? Are they similar to the skill sets that our kids need to be a student from home? How's it changing what you're going to do post-pandemic? Or are we just going to try to get the kids back pretending none of this happened? And while the technology is changing, our kids have changed. It's not just the workplace, our kids have changed. This technology is an extension of their bodies. They've never lived without this technology, and it's changed them. Let me give you a primary example. I wonder how many of you within 1 week of becoming old enough to get a driver's license, got your driver's license or driving permit at least. Look at today's kids. They're not doing it nearly as often. Another thing that's changed, and by the way, I think this is a very good thing about our kids, but nonetheless a change. I wonder if how many of you ever had an adult alcoholic beverage with a friend before you were legally of age to have one. Look what's happened today. I wonder how many of you had a date before you graduated from high school. Look at today's kids. How many of you worked at 1 or more part-time jobs before you graduated from high school? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a fundamental shift in behavior. It's not just the technology has changed. It's not just the world the kids are going to enter has changed. It's not just the kids have changed. All these things have changed. Therefore, what do schools do post-pandemic? If 35% of all workers are going to work from home forever, and you need a different skill set, let me ask you, should every kid on an ongoing basis be required to do some work from home to develop those skills? Now, I'm not saying full-time. Or what about this? You got some teachers and kids who were great in face-to-face instruction that have struggled in digital and remote. You get some other kids and teachers who weren't your best in face-to-face, actually done better in digital. So are we going to have all kids and all teachers return face-to-face once we can? Or do we need to rethink this whole area of remote? When do we get it? Who gets it? How do we do it? Explosion in mental health. If we had a mental health problem last March, ask anybody in the mental health profession. It has absolutely exploded. What does it mean? Post-pandemic, I'm convinced we will be more focused on the whole child than just academics than we were pre-pandemic. But as you do that, we begin to see, you know what, our kids are really, really different, not only academically, but emotionally. And what we also see is with this advancing technology and remote learning, you know, they don't have to be all in class at the same time. Are we going to return to the standardized system built around the old factory model that all kids take every course for the same amount of time on a given schedule? Or is it going to be personalized? The kids that need more time in math, we will give that to them. Maybe they don't need as much time in English language arts or vice versa. Because see, with the advancing technology, we can personalize the system. If we're going to hit mental health and all these other issues, there's not enough time. There's not enough hours in the day. And so this National Commission I'm going to chair, these are the things we're beginning to have deep discussions on. And we'll be making recommendations to USDOE, to state school boards, to local school boards, to superintendents. But we'll also be trying to create the nation's best practices around these. And one of them is we've got to reduce the number of standards. We've made everything a priority. When everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. But how do you prioritize those standards? What ones are essential versus nice to know? It's something I think we will clearly see over the next year, a reshuffling of the standards. But those standards that are most important, we can no longer just teach, test, and lose them. We've got to teach them to a level of mastery. And you teach them to a level of mastery through the application of knowledge. If any of you know the rigor and relevance framework, that's quad D in that rigor and relevance framework. So we're going to move from covering tons of standards to teaching the essential standards in a deep, meaningful way. It changes how you teach. It changes how you use technology. It changes and creates a huge professional development for all of us. But none of that is going to be possible until you recognize that you have created a culture that will permit it to happen. Culture trumps strategy. I'm going to be asking Ray to take from here and then he and I will join us in a Q&A because Ray, I just kind of defined the problem. As usual, I'll let you have the solution. Defining the problem is easy. You got the tough job, the solution.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if I have the toughest of the jobs. I think a lot of the people that are listening that have to apply a lot of this have a pretty tough road ahead of them. And, you know, I just so much appreciate the push that you give us, Bill, to look ahead. And I know many of the people that are on this call, on this webinar, are in classrooms, are leaders in systems, or are providing services to our students. And we live in an incredibly challenging time, tremendous amount of uncertainty. And so what I'd like to do is talk a bit with you all as I begin to share my screen. Let's see, here we go. If I can get that up there. And share with you some of the work that I've been doing kind of parallel to the work that Bill has been doing for a while, and to try to think about, you know, what's next and what's happening. So the best way for me to do this, for those of you that have heard me talk before, you'll hear some things that are very traditional for me to talk about, but I'm going to get into some of the practices and some of the work that we've had to adjust because of what we've experienced. I mean, there's no doubt that COVID-19 will be remembered as this historic deployment of remote learning when we really weren't ready for it. So let me take you down this road. And the road goes through what I call the VUCA world. Many of you that have heard me talk or read some of my work, this is the world we live in today. And this was pre-COVID. It was a VUCA world. The VUCA standing for volatile. Things are happening, can happen very quickly. Uncertainty, growing instability and unpredictability. And I know one of the questions that came in on the chat box, which we'll get to later, but it was about on the Q&A box, it dealt with the expiration of the eviction notices. And once that happens, all these kids that are being held in apartments where they haven't been paying the rent, they'll become homeless. And there's already people in the homeless shelters, and it's going to generate a lot of challenges for our students. There's great uncertainty as well as great complexity. The environment is dynamic, and there's lots of connection, lots of different relationships, and they're not as typical as we would see them. And the world is also full of ambiguity, and it's difficult to understand and make meaning of what's going on. I think we all experience this. And this VUCA world was just accelerated into what I really feel it's caused a very different world than we've ever been trained to be in and work in. And it's accelerated movement to what I'm calling the learn from anywhere future. And that sounds kind of crazy, but the fact is we have now taken our ability as educators, the ability to teach and to learn, and we're now having to think about how do we apply that everywhere in our community. Because of that, because of the environment we're in, we're faced with lots of uncertainty. And uncertainty is the only certainty there is right now, and we're going to have to accept that. That's one of the important things that's driving many of our educators and many of our leaders crazy. It's the uncertainty. It's not going to go away. And what you have to understand is you didn't cause the uncertainty, right? A lot of life is random, and what happens, to you is not your doing. This is not our doing. This is random. But here's what we know: in great times of uncertainty, what's really important is having a powerful vision to help guide your work and stay focused on that work. That's what's really important for us. Let's not get away from what the vision of our work, the true mission and vision of our work is. That's what keeps us straight on target in times of great uncertainty. So I'd like you to think about that. And the question, and Bill talked a bit about this, but what will your system do and look like when COVID-19 challenge is behind us? When this challenge is behind us, what will our systems look like? And what are we learning in the systems now that we need to really begin to build into our regular daily work as educators? So if you can hold on to that thought, that question, I'd like to have you hold on to that till I get done, because I'm going to come back to that question at the end. But I have other questions, and I think questions are important when there's a lot of uncertainty. Questions help us learn. And so my question to a lot of you out there is, what have you learned about the school system? What have you learned about the educators? What have you learned about the students? In all of these questions, I could say I've learned that some school systems have been amazingly quick to adapt. I know of educators that are just pouring their life into this work and have transformed themselves. I know of other schools and educators that are saying enough is enough. I can't deal with this. I know students that have not done well in traditional education that are doing well in the online world. And they're doing well outside of school. They're learning, and they're not in the traditional environment. I know this from studies that we've been doing. And then the question is, what do we need to build into our school systems to ensure future success? Like, what are the things that we see that are working now, even as they are just cobbled together? We're starting to see a sense of some things working, and we need to grab a hold of those and figure out, what are we going to do with those? So I want to take you back to I'm going to say March of 2020, when all of this began. And what I want to do for the next 10 or 15 minutes is take you back to when this all began, to get a sense to you with you all of this first question, like, what have we learned about our school system, right? What have we learned in this work that's going on? So I start with a quote from Charles Darwin. And I think this is very important, very, very important for us in education. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the most adaptive to change. So the question is this, what we face right now, we're facing the adaptive challenge of our lifetimes in education. And how will we respond? That's really the issue. This is what began in March of 2020, the adaptive challenge of our lifetime. COVID-19 accelerated what we know we have been feeling for about 15 to 20 years in public education. And that accelerated almost overnight. So I decided in March, when that happened, and some of you that have listened to a webinar most recently with me, you've seen these 8 stages. I'm going to walk through these very quickly, but I want everybody out there to understand what we learned under the crisis leadership model that emerged, I'm going to say in mid-March. And it's tied to the 8 stages of grief, really. So let me share these with you. I'll share 3 at a time on a screen and walk you through them. See if this resonates with all of you out there as to what you experienced during the early March, during the mid-March period of time. It starts with shock, mid-March, kind of the initial paralysis. Oh my God, what is going on? They're telling us we're going to have to close our schools. So what we were all doing is wait to see, how bad could this get? And what are the neighboring districts doing? It was kind of an initial paralysis. They're telling us in the next week, we're going to have to shut our schools down. What will that mean? So that was the initial paralysis. The next phase we went into was trying to avoid the inevitable, the denial. We're just going to send kids home with packets. We'll arm the teachers with Zoom or some other, and we'll replicate the face-to-face home classroom experience at home until this gets through. And that's what a lot of us did. A lot of districts did. I remember watching many young kids leaving school with all their books and all their materials and lots of printed sheets. And, and then what happened was, once they got all home, in our schools, we started to field phone calls from frustrated parents who were turned into learning coaches. And the rage at the way this system that we threw at them was a poor substitute for what they knew as face-to-face education. So these are the first 3 stages we went to in March, and this kind of started to leak into April. And then we went into the bargaining stage and the depression stage, and followed by testing stage, not state testing, by the way. So the bargaining period of time, so we started to say, this sending kids home with packets and Zoom is not working. And what happened was administrators and superintendents and curriculum directors started purchasing online courses and online materials, anything they could do to augment the work that we sent our kids home with. That's what we did. And it was an okay thing to do, because that's what we were in a crisis. Then once we did that, there was a realization of what was the inevitable. And we recognized that unless we really took this on as an all-in approach, we were really just patchworking things, and this was not going to work. That's what we knew. We tried to plug every hole we possibly could. And I want to thank all the educators and all the administrators that did that work, because that's all we could do. We were not ready to unleash a full system in the vast majority of our schools. So, but what did happen after that is that school districts and leadership, teacher leaders, they said, let's sit down. We got to seek realistic solutions. Look, online has been around for a long time. And there are experienced people out there that know how to provide curriculum, know how to get some work done. We have to begin to learn from those people that are really good at doing this. And that's where we started to go in many of our schools. And then it led to the last two phases of this work, which was acceptance, recognition that site-based learning is not scalable in an emergency situation. We really had to do for online learning what we've always done for face-to-face, which is build powerful learning systems that could support the work that our administrators, teachers, curriculum development people, we have to have a fully implemented model. It can't be, like the little spare tire in your car that will get you the next 50 miles after you go. No, we need to build strong, high quality systems. And the districts really do need to begin to provide that quality instruction in multiple delivery models. We have to have a powerful and high quality online system. We have to have a powerful and high quality blended system. And we have to have a high quality face-to-face system. We need to be able to do that. And these systems, as Bill mentioned, we have to get to the point where we can personalize these. That's what we really need to build. And the preparation, this well-designed, research-based training, it's going to take lots of work and deep work. And at the time I was developing this, the school year begins this year, should have begun this year in a far better than it ended last year. And I think all of the schools will agree that it's better this year, and it will be even better next year. But we need to understand, as Bill was laying out, that the world has changed and it's not going back. It is going to look very, very different. And so what are we learning about our systems? Well, let me share something that we learned about this system is that, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but in many of our systems, we took leadership and we gave a lot of leadership and site-based management to everybody. So all in big systems and small systems, lots of content decisions were being made all throughout the district. So when we had to go online, it was impossible. It was impossible to build a strong remote system because we had no one system or two or three systems that were consistent amongst all of our students. And I'm not suggesting we do away with site-based management. I'm suggesting, however, what we are learning is that we have to have learning systems in place. So we need to have those systems that cover our schools in a way that are systemic. So that work, what we learned from this work, the work that I was just talking about, what wasn't working, what we have to do is we're learning, as we learn about these systems, it caused us at the National Dropout Prevention Center to take a very close look at our core strategies and how they need to be redesigned and how they need to be used in very different ways. Let's face it, we have never really been organized to deliver in a virtual, personalized way, but we are now, and we have. So let me take you through a little bit of the work that's gone on with the research teams at National Dropout Prevention on a couple of things that we've looked at over this period of time. And many of them tie directly in, and this was done, by the way, not in concert with Bill, but parallel, because it's all lined up. The thinking is all really lined up. Let me share this with you. Childhood trauma. Childhood trauma was named our nation's single most important public health challenge in mid 2014, 2015. This is prior to COVID-19. But here's the thing. I'm not sure we were all really all in on this. We were being distracted by state testing and other things. And this has become a significant issue. And it has such an impact on not just our students, but our teachers and our families and across our communities. Childhood trauma. It's involving all of these areas. I mean, we know even now post-COVID that these have actually escalated the needs of our children and our families when it comes to trauma. And as I was saying earlier, in one of the questions that, the very first question that was dropped in the Q&A box talks about our homeless children. Our children are going to be evicted from these houses, the apartments that they're in. We're undercounting all these people. It's going to cause even more of a problem in our schools and in our systems. So at the National Dropout Prevention Center, we've been following this. We've been paying attention to it. We know that schools are really reporting an incredible complexity to our preschool and general population students coming into our schools. You realize preschool suspensions, we had 8,700 preschool expulsions and suspensions a year. 8,700 of our youngest children who aren't even in our K-12 system yet, they're being suspended. This is a growing problem. These issues are significant. And the demand that we're hearing from our prevention specialists out in the field and our professionals is we need mental health, more special ed, more social emotional expertise in our schools. And we would agree with that. But here's the one thing we know, we're not going to get a lot more professionals at the start of this. So what we've done at the National Dropout Prevention Center is really worked hard on the development of a Traumaskilled Schools initiative that involves the building into our system of these 5 skills, these 5 essential factors that our students need in our schools. They need connection. They need security. They need a sense of achievement. They need a sense of autonomy that they can do things for themselves. They need a sense of fulfillment. All of our students need a sense of fulfillment that they can help others. These are things that we could build into our schools. These are strategies we could build into our schools, kind of like a tier 1 RTI strategy that can reduce the impact of all of that trauma work that I was talking about. And at the National Dropout Prevention Center, John Gaylor and the team have built an amazing Traumaskilled Schools model. That is a process we take schools through. Schools can acquire a certification as a Traumaskilled School model. The model now in full development can be delivered virtually. Why? Because that's what we have to do. We have to make these changes, but this has become absolutely critical to the dropout prevention problem, to the student success problem, to the ability of our schools to engage our students so that they become the lifelong learners we know they need to be. This is a very powerful tool that I think if you're at all interested in, you should reach out and let us know about that. But this is becoming a priority, way above state testing. And as Bill pointed out, it is an issue. This social emotional learning, this mental health issue, this is significant, but we can reduce a vast amount of it through developing a trauma-skilled school. Now, that's just one of the areas at the National Dropout Prevention Center we began to think about this work, and we started to look at it as soon as the COVID situation was upon us. But at National Dropout Prevention, some of you that know us, we also have had a powerful set of strategies, there's 15 of them, on dropout prevention and how to increase the graduation rates for all. And in our effort to understand those 15 strategies against the world we're looking at now, we dug in deep with a team, and we've kind of redesigned the way the 15 strategies are approached using the knowledge that we've gained from this incredible, I want to say, rapid deployment of remote learning and rapid transition in our schools. So some of you out there that are regular attendees at National Dropout Prevention work know that we have, since the mid-'80s, have been working with these 15 effective strategies. We began to question, how do we know it's just 15? Maybe it's only 12. We began to talk about what's the environment that we're in now in our schools. Are these 15 still the 15? And our answer is these 15 are still the 15. But we need to think about them differently, and we need to think differently about how the strategy is used. So we went into building a model that we're referring to at this point in time on a temporary hold title on leading student success. And what we've understood from this work, as we took a deep dive into the 15 strategies, we realized that successful practices merged into a successful school will create successful students. It's really success by design, not by chance. And when we take what Bill was sharing with us, let me walk you through this model in a very 50,000 foot level. But I think you'll get a better understanding of how we're looking at these strategies that we know work, that the research points to as being very effective at increasing student success in our schools. So we first begin, and I'm just going to show you the 5 steps, and then I'll go into a little detail of each one. But we begin with, this has to begin with leadership. And it has to begin with the theory of leadership and the theory of collective efficacy. We know that through collective efficacy, significant things can happen in our schools, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But we start with the gathering together of, and when we say leadership, we're talking not about leadership as a position. We're talking about people that are focused on leading an institution. And we need to think about building a systemic approach, an approach that is all-inclusive in our schools. We then take a look at what some of the essential elements are for making, for building a powerful systemic system. And some of those relate exactly to what Bill was talking about. We have to deal with the social emotional challenges that many of our students face. We have to think about the parents and the connecting to the community. We move from there to, it needs to be, the center of a school district's initiative, this work. And by the way, we know if we're going to personalize things, that district-wide initiatives don't reach everybody. So we run district-wide initiatives maybe to figure out that supports 90% of our students, and that we then have to go to personalized strategy to get the balance of our students to graduate. That's what we're looking at. So real quickly, as we think this through, leadership, what does it look like? It looks like what we call leadership density. It looks like when we put a team of educators together, that they all collectively believe that their actions can positively influence the outcome of students. And when that happens, we get an effect size of 1.7. You can see that on the screen. 1.57 is 4 times the growth of what we would expect in a year. So collective efficacy, when people believe they can make a difference, and this is the adults we're talking about, great things happen. If you get a group of people like that, and they begin to attempt a systemic approach in their school, not one that's just skims across the top, but one that goes deep into the system. They build that into the system in every nook and cranny of the system. That's when we see that second stage really kicking in. The third stage is they need to focus on these essential elements. Safe learning environments, well, that deals with the Traumaskilled Schools piece. Family and community engagement is critical. School community collaboration, these are all the research-based essential elements that come from our 15 strategies. And last, professional development that's focused on this work, not just any kind of professional development, but focused on these essential elements. When we look at that, when we drive these initiatives into a school, one of the things that Bill said in his talk was that we have to reduce the number of initiatives. We have to reduce the number of standards because we're trying to do too much. And so in a school, at a school district level, we have initiatives. We shouldn't be taking on every initiative. Literacy these are high leverage strategies that you see on the screen right now. Literacy, student engagement. This whole idea of career tech education is about application and a strong focus on early childhood education. These are district initiatives that will help to escalate and increase the number of our students that are going to perform well. And when they start performing well, they get that sense that they are in control, that they are valued, they are part of the system. And this helps drive success for all of our trauma impacted students. And lastly, look, a lot of these models aren't going to reach every single student in our system. For some students, we're going to need mentoring. For some students, we're going to need alternative education. For some students, service learning will be the thing that will light the flame for them to learn, or an after school or an out of school opportunities. These programs are absolutely essential. And these programs are at the heart of the redesign of the work at the National Dropout Prevention Center. So this is the process. We'll be talking more about it in the future, but this process has come from the research that many of us have been doing at the center for the last many years. So when I think about that model, and I think about a recent research study that I just reviewed that talks about the takeaways from the rapid deployment of remote learning. What happened after that rapid deployment of remote learning in March last year that brought us to the end of the school year? Well, there were three things that are of value to all of us in education to understand. Now, the first of the three key findings is this: there is a deeper understanding of the value and context for digital learning tools. I know that not everybody loves digital learning tools, but let me say this, that post-COVID, I would not be standing here saying there's a deep understanding of the value of digital learning tools. But now, post-COVID, certainly are. We know that. The other thing we know is that parents have a stronger appreciation of digital learning as a mode of delivery than they did before. I'm not saying they're all embracing it. As a matter of fact, most superintendents that I talk with, and I know it's a bunch of them are on the call today, on the webinar today, a lot of districts are saying to me, Ray, my district is not bipolar, it's tripolar. We got people that want all their kids online. We have people that want all their kids hybrid, and we have people that want all their kids face-to-face. That's true. But one thing we do know, that parents in general have a stronger appreciation for digital learning as a delivery model. And the other thing that we've learned is that our students have a deeper appreciation of technology as a learning tool because it's been part of their lives, and now they're seeing schools model it. That's even better. So we're seeing these moments of bright light following the COVID-19 experience, where we're seeing now there's more value here. So when we talk about these systemic strategies, we can build them so that they can be personalized by integrating powerful AI and powerful digital tools. But now let me just say this, that does not take away the relationships that our teachers have with our kids. I'm just talking about personalizing instruction. The relationship piece is absolutely critical. So in this VUCA world, as I described, this world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, in the past, pre-COVID, I used to say to school districts, look, you have to spend 80% of your time on doing what you've already been doing, but just do it better. And you got to spend 20% of your time inventing a different future for our students. Here's what I've learned post-COVID. We now really need to spend only about 25% of our time on what we used to do. And we have to start spending 75% of our time on what the future of our educational system will look like. We need to bring in educators. We need to evaluate what we have been doing and what has been working and start to build the future of our school system there by what we're doing. Build it as we go. Remote for all, Bill talked about. Bill talked about standardized versus personalized. He talked about reducing the strategies. He talked about us delivering at the highest of level. We have to teach to the application level. That's what we need to do. That's where we need to start to begin to do this work. It is going to be building it as we go. That's what we're going to see. Now, when I say that, as I get close to wrapping my part of this talk up and opening this up to some questions, we need to understand the shift that is going on. We're really moving from being an efficient school system to scalable learning. How do we scale this new system? And the one thing I want to caution everybody here on is a topic that I've been looking at most recently, and that's this. It's called absorptive capacity. It's the ability of an organization, as you can see there, to identify, value, assimilate, but most of all, apply new knowledge. The brains of our educators are about ready to explode. Just think about this absorptive capacity as the paper towel test. I don't care what kind of paper towel you use. Eventually, whether it's Bounty or whether it's the store-bought brand, once they get saturated, they don't take anything else on. You're just moving the mess around. And I'm concerned about the absorptive capacity of our professionals, of our families, of our students. We have to start to understand this. So if we're going to build it as we go, we have to be careful about the balance of how much of this we do. In meeting with superintendents, I often hear from them, you know, I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can take it much longer, and I don't know if our educators can take it much longer with all of the multiple demands coming on. We've got to focus. We've got to think about the vision about what we want to create out there. That's really keeping our eyes on the future will be the only thing that'll get us through this, as well as this careful thoughts and considerations about what we see going on here. So with that, I want to share with you, solving challenges in a VUCA world is not easy. It's not easy, but for those of you that experience this or experience this webinar today, one of my slide here could be of some help to you. This is the Kosh model for problem solving and dealing with problems. It's designed to be used in what we call the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And what you have here is a scale. How well can you predict the outcomes of your actions? Can you at a high level or at a low level? How much do you know about your situation? I know a lot, I don't know much. See, the more uncertain you are up here, the way you would approach that is you have to be flexible and willing to change assumptions when faced with new knowledge. So you start something and you're not sure where it's going to go. You have to be ready to adjust it and say, nope, we're not going to do that. Now we're going to do something else. And that does not mean that you failed. It just means that approach didn't work. We got to try something else. We have to learn how to plan a range of approaches to learning and be willing to change. We can't, our days of laminating things has got to stop. We've got to try some things. If we don't really know how the actions are going to be perceived, and if we don't really know much about it, we're in an uncertain area. Now, even today very much, if you really know if you know a lot about the situation and you can understand the predictable outcomes, you're still stuck here. You're going to have to collaborate to network thinking around complexity, because when you touch one thing these days, it affects everything, right? So we have to think about that. We have to listen to other perspectives. That's what we have to do, and that we reframe our viewpoints. So this tool can be very helpful to you as a leader, as a classroom educator, as a teacher leader, as a superintendent, as a curriculum director. This model, the Kosh model, is a pretty handy model just to think through the challenges in this very complex, very difficult, very challenging world. So when we have COVID-19 behind us, what will our learning systems look like? That's what I asked you at the beginning of my remarks. I mean, what will it look like in a year from now if that's when we can say COVID is behind us? Will we be in a rush to return to what was? Or will we really value some of the pieces of the work that we know have shown us great hope? Where I meet with superintendents and I meet with school teachers and administrators, and they're saying, I can't believe some of our best students can't function in the online world. They need to be in class. What do we do for them? And these are our best students. Why? Because that model fit them the best. But now we're seeing some students that are shining in a hybrid model or shining in an online model. How do we begin to think about that? Because we do have to have multiple delivery systems. We do have to have remote available. And as Bill said so clearly in his opening remarks, being able to be a learner online is a career-ready skill for the future. That we do not. I don't want you to take that as we're separating people out and we're all going to be robotics. No, but it's a skill. It's like being able to use a hammer. It's about being able to use a set of sockets. It's about being able to, to be a problem solver. It's the skill. It's a skill that we all will need and our students will need. How do we build the right kind of system that they can gravitate to that? So with that, I want you to think about this. If you want to reach out to us at NDPC, this is our info line, ndpc@dropoutprevention.org. We can be happy to share it with you. We will make sure our slides are available to everybody. But if you're interested in learning more about any of the things I talked about, that's up for grabs. And so with that, at this point in time, I'm going to stop my screen share. Hopefully Bill's still out there and he hasn't left. I haven't driven him away, and we get Bill to pop up and end up sharing some of our any questions that you have. If you want to chat with us, drop a question in the Q&A box. And I know I see one. Let's see. How do equity, inclusion, and quality education for all students fit into your vision? So I'm gonna answer this question live. And this point about equity, inclusion, and quality education for all, if we design models that are multiple models, these models that are that for our students that can learn online, can learn multiple ways through hybrid models or through face-to-face, the model really, that way we find out what is success for students. What is it? What combination? I know that been working a bit with the folks in Middletown, Connecticut, that are thinking about designing an educational program where students will be able to choose how they'd like to take particular courses. I'd like to take my math face-to-face because I might struggle more. I'm good at social studies. I'll take that online. There's ways about thinking about, we can adjust. The more we can adjust the personalized needs of our students, the better job we're going to do on delivering on the issues of equity in our classrooms. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. Bill, I'm not sure if you're out there.
Yeah, can you hear me, Ray?
I can hear you. I just can't see.
I can't. I'm trying. I actually am going back in.
Oh, I think Thomas. I see Thomas jumped up. There's Todd Daggett coming back.
Now we'll see here.
All right, we'll see what goes on. Let me go grab some more questions.
I got the same issue, Thomas, before. I keep hitting start video, but it doesn't start on me. So, Ray, I can see you. I don't know why it won't let me back in, but it won't let me back up there.
Oh, there you were.
There we go.
Now, Bill.
I clicked out, see, I only talk about technology, right? And you've heard me say this a lot. I talk about it, but don't ask me to do it. But I don't actually think this is my problem. For some reason, it wouldn't let me back in.
I'm not gonna think it's your problem. But Bill, one of the things, the question that came up, you might have heard me response on equity and inclusion and all of that. I know this work that you're going to be doing on this national commission. What's driving your passion in your career to take on this view of like, what's next in education? What's driving? I know a lot about you. We've worked together for over 20 years, but my thinking is, so why not, what's driving you for that?
You've been in education for a while, but I've been in a lot longer than you have, okay?
I wouldn't say a lot. I'd say a little bit more.
I'm in my 53rd year, okay?
I'm in the 47 or 48.
Just a child, Greg.
I'm a child.
Just a child. I made a decision a few months ago, Ray, to step back from kind of running the International Center. I still have a relationship with them, and I'm still obviously with you at SPN. But I became so convinced after COVID-19 hit that all the issues I've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years how fundamentally technology could change how we were organizing, delivering instruction, how we had this massive growing mental health issues with kids in this country, how we knew there were best practices out there, but we couldn't bring them to scale. And I knew that the system was resisting, okay? Well intended, but the system was organized to resist. And I came to the conclusion that COVID-19 was the tipping point of everything I've been trying to do, Ray, since you've known me for the last 30 years.
Yep.
But that it was going to take the incredible commitment of a broad group. And I began to talk with people like Dan Domenech, the exec director of AASA, and Mort Sherman, his deputy, and talking with the national school boards and talking with some governors and talking with lots of other people. I concluded it was time that almost everybody was saying we do have the tipping point. It was time to bring them together. And that's what this commission is going to do. It is going to bring nearly every major education organization in the country together. And at first we talk about having a representative from all those organizations as the commission, but in a lot of ways, Ray, they're the gatekeepers.
Yep.
And so what we made the decision to do is to take 12, 14 of the nation's most future-focused people, half from education, half from the private sector, from companies. When you were with Gates, you dealt with Bill Gates and others. You dealt with people on that from that other world. So we're going to put people, not Bill Gates, but people like that on the commission together with forward-thinking educators, but then bring two other groups, the associations to react. But we're bringing together another group, we're calling an advisory group of 20 to 25 well-respected, well-known, forward-thinking superintendents who are actually going to help write the questions for the commission and give us, these are the issues that really need to be looked at. And then we're going to circle it with about 25 districts that we think will have foundation funding for, that will be the national demonstration districts. And so, Ray, half the things you just talked about, some of those issues I just talked about, how can we change it? Let me give you one. You and I have spent the last 20 years crisscrossing the country, running into each other at airports all over. And what we know, because we attend so many conferences and speak at so many, we know that all speakers are of equal quality. They're equal quality in terms of people, but not as presentation skills. You know what else you know, right? With your grandkids, my grandkids, with our own children through the years, we had some teachers better than others. Suppose a school district took their very, very best math teachers and put them online for all the kids. And then took the rest of the math teachers and made them coaches, facilitators.
Yep.
Would that combination be better than asking all the teachers to be online? And we know the answer, of course. So help me understand why we don't do it.
Well,
That's the stuff the commission's going to get into.
Yeah, and it speaks to one of the questions which I talked about: equity and inclusion and quality. With technology, we can be much more inclusive. But we're also getting questions about the role of parents. What role do they play? In this home education or in this digital education. And I think I know in your committee that in your commission, I'm sure there'll be lots of those kind of issues raised as well.
Yeah.
One of the things we do know is that we need to be able to work with parents and define their role if their child is at home learning. That their role is a little different. They're the coach. They're the one that needs to think about the space, providing a space, a routine for their students, for their learning. And there's a lot of great training programs. And if those people that are interested, if you reach out to us at National Dropout Prevention, we could share some of those things where we've learned from some of the best. I was the dean at Southern New Hampshire University. I could tell you that we do know that it involves parents. It could also involve an older sister or brother. Not every home has the support systems at home that they need. One of the other things we know that is, if as educators, if we reach out personally and regularly to our students that are online, who we know who might be in a challenging environment, that does nothing but add value to the learning experience, is reaching out, dropping a quick email, dropping a quick chat box message, doing anything like that.
Ray, I know Thomas has been monitoring chat. I wonder if he's got any questions or he wants to.
Well, that was one of them, the role of parents. And then I've been looking at a couple that are interesting. Is how do districts prevent dropout rates during this pandemic? What are the things that we need to think about? It seems like we're probably going to see a much higher number of dropouts as a result of the pandemic.
Sure we are, unless we can make education exciting.
Well, that's
Ray. How come the kids are so engaged in gaming? How come we can't get them off the games? And you know what? If you really watch today's gaming, isn't gaming almost a learning experience for these kids as they try to get better and better?
Yeah.
So this goes back to this commission I'm going to head up. How about taking some of that methodology to teach math, to teach science around an area that a kid has an interest in? I'd say, Ray, I think one of the fundamental shifts here, if we want to reduce dropouts, if we want to engage kids, make them successful, is we really need to understand that the role of teacher has got to change.
Yep.
It's not about teaching. You say all the time, it's about learning. And what we are is like a coach. And we both did some coaching earlier in our careers. The coach doesn't get out on the field and play the game.
Yeah.
The kids play the game. The learning is what we've got to focus on, using technology differently. And that role of the teacher is to create the relationship with the kid, find out what's relevant, and don't think they have to be the one to disseminate all the knowledge. They facilitate it.
Yep. Yep. And I do think that one of the challenges we're going to have with respect to the dropout issue, and obviously as somebody who's focused on this, one of the things is that what we're learning, quite frankly, is that the impact of trauma is going to elevate the number of our children dropping out or disconnecting from school. And one of the reasons that's happening is because in many of those homes where we have dropouts, we also have parents who have lost their jobs. We have parents that are struggling. We have students that are struggling. And I'd love to be able to say on this webinar, we have solutions to that. We don't have solutions to that. This is about the uncertainty and what we think is going to happen. What I will say to you is that if we can create what Bill's talking about is a learn anywhere, anytime environment that's engaging for our students, we know that many of our students that have chosen not to return would return if they could fit it in their schedule. We know if it's part of an exciting opportunity for them, that's critical. I know we have a question about CTE as well, Bill, which is the issue of, how does CTE fit into this? How do we grow CTE if we're thinking that, let me get to the actual question. If we get to the point of, I'll scroll down to it. The issue was, how do we deal with CTE in the online world?
Through a combination of experiences. I'll give you the example. I'm doing some extensive work right now in the Virgin Islands, helping restructure their system.
Mm-hmm.
And we've looked at the PTEC program. That's pretty common
in
states in the country. And PTEC does a combination of things. Number one, it's in middle school begins to develop broad clusters of where kids have an interest. And then in ninth grade, when they're taking your academics, the academics relate to that cluster. So if in math class, the problems I get if I'm interested in healthcare relates to how do I use that math concept in healthcare,
Right.
that science concept in healthcare. Moving up into, as you move into 10th, 11th, 12th grade, more and more direct mentorship under somebody in the industry, more work experience, if you will, and the role of the teacher changes. And the role of the teacher changes because, again, they become more a facilitator than simply the instructor. They're the coach, they're the facilitator. And then what they're doing is taking just sensational teachers who can demonstrate something,
Yeah.
putting them online, and then sending the kid out into a work experience. And as the teacher, I'm not necessarily teaching all the classes. I'm coaching that kid through the system.
Yeah.
We've seen incredible results with it in a number of districts. I could give you other examples too. There's a pre-engineering type program that Tim Ott here, who heads up our tech center, talks a lot about. There's a number of innovative programs, but the first thing is we got to recognize purpose of school cannot be to prepare kids for the next grade, the next test, the next level of education. The purpose of school is to prepare kids to be independent and successful as adults out of the education system.
Yes. Yes.
Not in the education.
Yes. Absolutely.
Now a different set of skills.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. We've got a couple of really interesting questions. And there's one that I've just been spinning my head on a little bit, and it comes from one of the people anonymously, but it says, if you understand this, these pandemic pods where parents are getting together with other families and his question is, pandemic pods have shown how parents and district leaders are clashing over decisions about in-person and remote learning. How should a centralized system and its administrators respond to the growing desire for decentralized education with more autonomy in the hands of parents and students? So I'm going to just say from the point I would share is I think that given what we're seeing out there and these parents saying we'd like to work and create our own kind of environment, I think one of the things that we should be doing is if our vision and if our where we're going is clear, that we want to make all of our children, ready to live in the world and be productive in the world that is outside of school, I think we have to reach out at times and say, how can we help those parents and those groups of parents? How can we support them with content and with the ability, with some expertise? And the reason I say that is that if we can do that well, they will likely rejoin the systems. But I think we need to think that it's not a hands-off situation, but it's a connecting to them. I'm not sure.
I agree. I know my next statement won't be popular. We've got too many of us in education who are the gatekeepers to the schools of the past.
Yeah.
We can't do that. You've heard me in many speeches close a statement by saying, let's love the kids and their future more than we do our schools and our past. And I think we've got to abandon some of those old practices. And I do think they'll come back to us because there's the whole issue of, SEL type skills, actually probably more important than the academic skills.
Yeah.
You have got to put kids into a bigger and broader experience in life, i.e. the broader experience of schools, to really develop those.
Yep.
So it's a new partnership. We got to be willing to break the old model.
Yeah. I so much agree. And I know it's easier to say than to do. So it's easier for us to say it. And it's going to be more difficult for those districts that are experiencing this. But I think we can learn from all of these experiences. And I think we can share our practices and ideas. When I was commissioner in Vermont, I set up homeschool for parents that were homeschooling. I set up centers all around the state, filled it with equipment and laptops and said, use it if you want. I wanted to show that we were open to supporting and figuring out if parents want to educate their kids that way, let's be connected to it. Let's share some of the learning. The last question that I see, you want to add anything to that, Bill? Are you okay on that?
No, only thing I would add is the people said, the problem was the K-12. Let me tell you, who's in big trouble is not K-12.
No.
Because we're always going to be semi-safe because a lot of people want us for childcare.
Right.
Not our mission. Who's in big trouble? Higher education.
I know that group very well as a former dean. Yep.
It is deep, deep trouble in this country.
Yep.
We have driven the cost sky high. Google is taking advantage of that right now.
Oh, yes.
Partnership with 50 companies on their certificate programs.
Yes.
6 months certificate program, guaranteed employment.
Yep.
At a salary probably higher than almost anybody on this webinar is getting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay?
sure. Yep.
And parents are beginning to say, whoa, yeah. Yeah.
And that's a really good point, though, Bill. It's a point for all of the people on the webinar to understand that when we talk about VUCA World, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and we think about the disruption going on in higher ed at the same time, the pandemic and the disruption in the public schools, and we're trying to hold on to things. And higher ed is, when I was at SNHU, we were deconstructing our programs, our degree programs, because there's too much in them. It's, make them more practical and drive the cost down and figure out what skills they need to enter the workplace. Those are lots of things. We're juggling so many things. That's why it's probably one of the most exciting times, but it's also one of the most crazy times in our heads. Absorptive capacity. I don't know how much more we can take. Let me answer this last question that one of the attendees has tossed out to us, which is, how is the trauma-skilled school model, which I talked about, different from mental health training for trauma-skilled schools? Let me share with you a couple of thoughts about that as Bill and I bring this to close. First of all, the trauma-skilled schools model that we use is a model that is designed for all teachers, all paraprofessionals, the cooks, custodians. And what we want to do is we want to train them about give them the knowledge about trauma, to give them things we should understand, that triggers that we may be doing. So in a school, it's really about how do we reduce the impact of trauma on learning for the vast majority of our kids without identifying kids. So let's look at things like we have some, in some schools, the announcements in the morning are made by the principal who shouts them out. I'm just saying that, okay? And to a child who at home has parents yelling at him, being abused by a parent, an adult who's yelling, those morning announcements are triggers. We need to understand these things that affect a lot of our kids. A student that might struggle to get to school on time, and we cut breakfast off at 8:15, and the student can't get there, and he gets there at 8:25, and say, "Yup, you're late. You can't have breakfast." This child might have been working, organize his own brothers and sisters to get to school. And we need to understand the things that trigger reactions from our trauma impacted kids. Now, one of the things Bill put on his last slide today, if you don't remember, it was culture trumps strategy. And here's the thing. The culture in our schools needs to be understanding of what the ways trauma impacts our kids. And we need to understand the rules and regulations and the things that we do in our school that are triggers to many of our children that struggle. And so the trauma-skilled school model that we use at the National Dropout Prevention Center is really designed to be an RTI level 1. It's kind of like reading strategies for all. What can we do to reduce the impact of the rules, regulations, and learning in our school? What can we do to reduce that impact? If we can reduce 35 to 50% of our trauma problems just by changing some things in our school, some rules, regulations, building resilience into our students in our classrooms, then we can reduce that number. We can make a big impact on our school. So it's a very different model. It's a model that is used to address all of our students. So with that,
Ray, before you close,
yeah.
If we could ask Thomas to put back up either your email or my email or his email.
I can do that.
Yeah,
Um,
because I'd like to say to the audience, if any of you would like to have a roundtable with a leadership team in your school district or a presentation, email whatever email Ray puts up there. That's good. And we will be glad to try to work with you to do that.
Yep.
Because you got to begin the discussion.
Yep.
And in an ideal world, when I present, I usually use a number of videos and stuff to demonstrate this cutting edge technology. And I know you do too, Ray.
Yep.
If anybody would like to have a follow-up discussion, roundtable discussion, let us know and we'll be glad to try to get back and do it for a group in your district. Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Bill. And thanks everybody who's hung in there with us this afternoon. We're so appreciative of the work that you're all doing. As Bill said, if you're interested in finding out more or maybe arranging a conversation, we'd be happy to work on it. This is the general info email, and this comes into the National Dropout Prevention Center. Our staff will look it over and direct it to me or Bill or whoever it is. But thanks so much. Thanks for all you do. Wish you all a very pleasant evening. And Bill, I just want to thank you so much for the charge you're picking up with this commission and how much we're looking forward to that work impacting education in the future. Thanks all. Thanks very much.